You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
Welcome back to another episode of the Project 365 podcast. We needed a couple of days to wrap our head around what we saw in game two. Coming to you after the Boston Celtics won game two, 105-98. And again, it is with great pleasure that I'm joined again by my good friend Josué Sédrjo. How are we doing, sir? You need a
We
few
are
days.
good.
Are we alive?
We did. We need to make sure we digest the information and really try to assess what took place in this game, what we have to look forward the rest of the series.
Absolutely. A lot of like little stories going on. Talk to me. What's on your mind looking at what happened in game two? Obviously, Boston came out with the win. Like, what's on your mind in this one? I'll let you take any
Well,
direction you want to go.
Sure. I mean, you have to start with the fact Boston is up 2-0, right? The protected home court. I think a lot of people who was looking at the series from making prediction standpoint or trying to evaluate the forces at play were very concerned about Boston shooting themselves in the foot and doing things like giving up a lead in a close game at home and giving up home court advantage and putting themselves behind the eight ball, forcing them to have to go win an important game on the road. So far, that has not been the case. I think there are, and we're going to have the opportunity to talk about this, there are some individuals on Boston that have performed really, really well that we need to highlight. But I think generally speaking, it's been a team effort. And I think that's what has made Boston this year from the point of being a 64-win team. And we're seeing that in this series. We've seen that throughout the playoff run, regardless whatever you want to say about the level of competition that they face. In this series particularly, you see a lot of flashes why they've been a 64-win team.
And there was multiple times during the season, like they were sometimes referring to themselves as the Big Six, right? Going back to what you're saying about they have a lot of players that are able to kind of sustain if somebody else has like an off night or whatever. So one player in particular kind of stood out for this game. We had the Porzingis game. Is it fair to say that this was the Jrue Holiday game?
For me, that's where I start. Again, I think you can talk about Jaylen Brown's effort without question. We're going to talk about Jason Tatum because I think there's an interesting conversation to have. You can make an argument Derek White saved the Celtics from potentially a catastrophic situation with his block at the end of the game. I know it's a team effort with Jaylen Brown, but Derek White had a huge part to play on that to make on that play. But for me, I'm gonna remember this game as the Jrue Holiday game. To give some of our listeners some context here, he was 11 of 14 for a total of 26 points, and he more than made up for the fact that Jason Tatum shot a 6 for 22. I think what we do need to mention, though, is we, on the previous episode, had given the Dallas Mavericks some homework and some assignment. And the fact that Boston has won this game gives us the chance to go back and review some of that homework we gave to the Dallas Mavericks students if they were going to win game two. So I identify four things we had talked about. Now, number one, we said we need Luka and Kyrie to be aggressive. They need not just to be good, but to take a lot of attempts consistently throughout the game. We had talked about making the game ugly, so playing in the mud. So we talked about the pace, the number of free throw attempts, and offensive rebounding. So if we go through those four aspects of that game, Kyrie and Luka had 21 of the first 28 Mavericks points in the first quarter. The scorer assisted 42 out of 51 of the Dallas Mavericks points scored at half. So up to that point, you could say homework check, assignment check. They finished the game with a combined 48 points. For Dallas to win, they probably need 65, maybe even 70 combined, considering, with the fact that it's the finals and even with the three-point era, you're looking at a 100 at the lowest, probably 110 points as a team to win the game. So those two guys, they need to give them 65. So partial check mark on the assignment. The pace. So in game one, we had a 91. It was a game with about 91 possessions. So let's say it wasn't fast, but it clearly wasn't slow. In game 2, the pace went up. Oh, it was 93 possessions. That's bad. That's not you didn't fulfill the assignment there. We said you needed to slow the pace down, you need to control the pace and make sure that it became a shot creation and a shot making game. Didn't do that. Free throw attempts. So Luka and Kyrie combined for 10 free throw attempts for the entire game. That's not enough. Dallas was up 24-20 as a team, but 24 free throw attempts for a whole game. That's not enough. And on top of that, Dallas fouled way too much. They were in the penalty for the first 2 quarters, back-to-back quarters, right off the bat. That's not now X. You didn't fulfill the assignment. The last one we had talked about offensive rebounding. It was 10-9 total for Boston. Oh, that's not going to cut it. How are you going to how are you supposed to scavenge some points if the other team has shot more threes and has grabbed more offensive rebounds than you? And that's why the Dallas Mavericks are in big part. That's why they've been down 2-0. We can talk about stuff that's happened during the game, but in terms of fulfilling the assignment, they didn't do it.
I agree. I think after I was looking at the first quarter, I was like, for the most part, Boston hadn't made a 3 until that last second at the end of the first quarter, where Jaylen Brown took the ball, they cleared out the whole left side, cleared the ball, and they kicked the ball to Al Horford. Al Horford made that last shot. I think for the most part, I was looking at the first game. I'm going on your side. I'm like, Dallas kind of, sort of did a good job, And we were asking Luka to be aggressive. How fun is he to watch when he's cooking like that?
He's unbelievable, man. There are like 2 passes. The one he did to PJ Washington on the right side, where he threw it ahead of where Washington was going to be, and it was like in between Brown's hand, right into PJ's pocket. He up fake. I'm like, these I never seen passes like the one to wrap around behind the back to Dante Exum on a bounce pass right in the shooting pocket. It's like this. We know, again, it's not like we didn't know this guy is good, but to witness the greatness always takes your breath away. Always.
Talking about 23 points in the first half.
And cooking, man.
Yeah.
Cooking. Dirk one-leggers, 3-point step back. I mean, cooking.
And
I'm thinking, I don't know for you, but in the moment, I'm thinking to myself, if he gets to 50, they might actually win. But you got to get to 50.
Yeah.
That is hard.
Yeah.
That is hard.
I agree, but there is some good that came out of that, because I think for the first time in the series, we saw Boston getting away from the single matchups. And for the first time in the series, they put 2 on the ball.
That's right.
Which I think kind of showed, I was like, whether we like it or not, that's a win for Dallas, because you were kind of getting them to have to adjust to.
And it was middle of the second quarter too. Like it was early in the game, early in the first half. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, now going to the second, you've already made them go to their curveball away from the fastball a little bit. I don't think it was every possession. It was like 3 or 4. A couple of them were off mistakes. So it's not like it was an automatic, coverage. But at the same time, it was encouraging. You're like, okay, he's cooking. As Mavericks, you're thinking, okay, Luka's cooking. On top of that, now he's getting assist opportunities. On top of that, we're getting like 1, 2, or 3 corner threes. Like, we might be able to get back on track here. At that time in the game, at least.
And I think what was also interesting to see is, like, again, that's a big part. I think Luka getting his confidence that he's a confident player, but just for him to be able to see that he can get some kind of success, especially in a half, for him to get 20, I think there's a mental boost that definitely goes to that, that can potentially translate to game 3. But I want to read you a couple of plays. There's a couple of times where Dallas decided to run Luka off the ball, which I found they were able to have success with. Let me give you a couple. In the second quarter, there was 11 minutes left. They set a pin down in the middle of the screen. Luka came off of it. Jaylen Brown cheated. Luka faded to the corner, shot a 3 in front of his bench. +3.
Yes.
Right? They run the same play again. 10 minutes 17 in the second quarter. This time, Jaylen Brown meets Luka at the top of the key. But again, because Jaylen Brown is in movement, right? Jaylen Brown's a physical defender. because you kind of get him a bit off balance, Luka's able to attack the closeout. Him having a stationary defender kind of puts him in that advantage where he bumps Jaylen Brown 1-2. He's able to get to the paint, pump fakes, and then makes that jump shot. Makes a paint two. In the third quarter, they ran a stagger for Kyrie, but it ended up being a decoy where Kyrie came off of it, and then Daniel Gafford set a down screen for Luka. Jaylen Brown, you remember that one? Jaylen Brown cheated it, and Luka got another top of the key three. And then at the end of the game, there was about 28 seconds left. They set a wide pin down, but then Luka shot that off foot, one-legged three.
It was too late. I mean, it's basically garbage time at that point.
It was too much. So for my analytics, for my basketball analytics junkies, that's point per possession 2 for Luka off the ball actions.
Like 2 points per possession?
2 points per possession.
I mean, hey, Dallas might want
Can
to
we expect to see more of that?
I mean, you run into I mean, one of the big takeaways here we gave Dallas some assignment. Let's go back to point number 1. We said Kyrie and Luka combined have to score for 65. I brought up the number 65, 70, kind of ballparking it. Well, Luka scored 32. That's half of the 65. So somebody fulfilled their part of the assignment. Somebody hasn't, and that's Kyrie. And I think he's going to get it from a media standpoint and from a narrative standpoint. But I think what Dallas can be encouraged by is that a lot of the looks in game 2, especially in the second half, were self-created. Kyrie self-created, but I don't know about open, but he had created separation. So that tells me, okay, he's found a rhythm. He's found a comfort level, because this was against multiple different defenders. The ones they're spacing against Derek White. There's a transition 3 against Tatum. Like, it was kind of going through everybody. So if Kyrie can get going early based on the fact that it's a make or miss league. So he had number 1 is create space. Number 2 is make the shots. He did part 1. You would like to think in game 3, part 2 will come. If he starts to get going, that allows Luka to be off the ball more. That allows that potential 2 points per possession to come at not just multiple times during the game, but 3 times, coming out of a timeout, coming out of, to key a run, to start a run. The when is just as important as the how many times does Dallas run that. So I think it starts with Kyrie. Kyrie has to get going, and I'm not sure there's a ton of galaxy brain analysis to be said about him. And if we're focused on game 2, I think game 1 is we can say everybody played pretty bad from a Dallas standpoint, but game 2, the reflectors are much more on him. And if he gets going, Dallas has a chance. If he doesn't, I really don't see how they win the series.
I put a little note in my book. I put a shout out PJ Washington, because as a third option, he's giving them hope, which I found is very encouraging.
Needs a bit. It's either Dallas has to have 3 third options. So you're looking at one of the bigs, Derek Jones and PJ Washington. All 3 of them have to be on, or it's PJ Washington has to be like the clear third option. Like, give him 20, 25 plus points, or maybe 19 points, 13 rebounds, maybe 3 assists in the pocket, 2 blocks, and it's the PJ Washington game. And I don't think it's a game 4 thing. I think it's game 3. I think it needs to happen tomorrow.
So what are some things that you think Dallas has to emphasize in game 3?
So there are some very important plays that really got my attention in this game, that if Dallas doesn't have an answer for this moving forward, I think it's absolutely curtains. We had talked about Boston need to get ready for switches against pick and roll involving Kristaps Porzingis. Although his health is a big, big question mark moving forward, and we're going to get to that, the 2 times he got to post up in the first half, the first time was below the free throw line. The next time was at the free throw line. And we had said he has to be doing this at the free throw line or lower. Dallas cannot allow him to do so. They just can't, especially now that he's going to be limited movement-wise. You want to make him as uncomfortable as possible. The further away from the rim, the better. Absolutely, you cannot allow him to post up on a switch anywhere below the free throw line. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that when it was 90-83 for Boston, Tatum took this horrible fadeaway on the dribble turnaround fade to maybe a feet above the free throw line. And Dallas got back in transition. Kyrie made a left-hand layup, leaning against the defender, left-handed, and made it. Mazzulla called timeout. Coach Joe Mazzulla called timeout immediately. And you didn't get the audio of the timeout, but I can assure you the timeout was like, we're not doing this. Like, no, it's a tight game, it's the finals. We're not doing this. Off no movement, off no driving kick game. We're not doing this. And 2 possessions later, Tatum drove hard on Daniel Gafford, earned 2 free throws, and Boston got back on track at that time in the game. So from a Dallas standpoint, you have to do things to force Boston into their bad habits. Because if they don't, Dallas cannot win this series. A big part of the Dallas preparation had to be, we are going to do things to make sure Boston shoots themselves in the foot. Because if they don't, we are not going to win this series, because their offense, their fastball on offense is better than ours, and their fastball on defense is better than ours. So one of those has to become not as good as it usually is. We had talked about some of the assignments. We said, game in the mud, offensive rebounds, free throw. They didn't do none of that. That same recipe applies to this game coming up. There's absolutely no question about that. So I think for me, it starts there from a Dallas standpoint.
I agree with you. I put a couple of things down. I think for me, the biggest thing is Dallas has to stay out of rotations. Like the more that they
That's
could
right.
keep the more that they could keep Boston players in front of them, the more that's going to force them to play in isolation. And then going back to what you said, that's kind of going to lead to their bad habits on offense. Because then what's going to end up happening is they're going to be standing around. But yes.
The defense, sorry, I've talked all about offense, but like you highlight we got to talk about the Dallas defense, because I think right now that's a bigger problem than the offense. The offense is not great, but defense is not good enough. Thanks to Second Spectrum, we got some metrics here to measure Dallas's defense at the point of attack. So they have a stat called the blow by rate. So how many times does the ball handler blow by his defender in a one-on-one situation? In game 1, again, thank you, Second Spectrum, it was 60.5%. For some context, that's the second worst that Dallas defense was the entire playoffs. So it was bad. It was awful. In game 2, it was 53%. So it was better, but clearly not better enough. You're trying to get to like significantly below 50, sure below 50, if not 45, 46, 47%. That's what you're trying to get at. So at the point of attack, whether it's Luka regarding effort or the quote unquote other role players who are there for defense, you just have to win your matchups, whether it's preparing your feet, doing your homework early, playing with energy, but whatever you got to do, you cannot allow the blow-bys. In contrast to that, again, thank you, Second Spectrum, Jason Tatum had the most drives he's ever had in his career with 29 in this game. And Jaylen Brown had the second most ever in his career. So the reason the Boston offense got going is because their top 2 best players avoided all their bad habits, and no matter what was going on in the game, put their head down and said, I have to get to the paint because this is how our team functions. If Dallas is going to force them into their bad habits, it starts with stopping the drives. And you just came off a game that, like I just said, this was the best driving game the 2 best player on Boston has ever had. If that happens again in game 3, it's curtains. It's over. So you cannot allow that to happen on defense from a Dallas Mavericks standpoint.
I think also in terms of being able to get matched up, right? You kind of hope that Dallas is going to make more shots, which is going to allow them to set their defense back. But I also think that I'm thinking outside of the box, man. I want to see. So, in my opinion, and we were talking about this a bit before, I think Jaylen Brown is the player that gives these guys the most problems because of his relentlessness to attack. right? I think the relentless, like the mentality puts Dallas in rotations. So I'm probably thinking, okay, let me see if Jaylen Brown can make some off the dribble threes, man. Like I'm trying to maybe, and maybe he makes some. Maybe he does. But if he doesn't, we don't have to switch. We don't have to rotate. We don't open up for their spread kind of offense. I think these are the little things that they have to talk about. We talked about zone, right? Are we going to potentially see more zone? There's that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to consider. Your point about Jaylen Brown, I mean, beyond the initial drive, right now the Dallas defense is giving, let's say, one effort defensively. So the concept about a good defense is you want to give multiple efforts defensively. I think we can safely say in game one, they averaged between 0 to a half effort per possession, just by eye test, right? It wasn't high. Game two was better, but it wasn't good enough. I think you'd see mostly one, right? You might see like a resistance at the point of attack. The Boston ball handler would switch direction and then still get to the paint. And there might be a help guy. If there's a help guy, then the corner guy's open. So you get like one effort. They got to get to like 2, 3 efforts. Oh, it's mostly 3 because Boston clearly has decided we're going to drive no matter what because this is what we need for our offense. Not only is Dallas not giving up enough efforts defensively, multiple efforts defensively, I don't know if you've noticed, but they're scrambling when the penetration is happening, when the first drive is happening. Guys are watching the ball, man. Guys have their head. Guys are turning away from their assignment to watch the ball handler and then running out and trying to close out. But then 2 guys go to the same guy. One guy goes to the wrong first pass. I mean, the initial drive is average and the help is not good. I mean, now you have no chance. You have to fix both of those things before game 3. Absolutely.
So we're looking at so much to unpack here. So we're looking at just even in terms of their preparation, right? You mentioned it before. Kind of a little side story. Porzingis kind of came out limping in game 2. I think today he was seen wearing a sleeve on that ankle. How much does that limit his mobility? How does Boston prepare for that? How does Dallas prepare for that? Or does Dallas not even think about that and just go full throttle as if he's fully active?
They have. I mean, the stuff we talked about is it's not Porzingis related. Like, not at one point did we say, what does Dallas have to do? Oh, they have to stop Kristaps Porzingis. Now, it's multiple things, not just him. I will say this: if he is not going to play, then Dallas has to find a way to unlock the lob zone offense. And I identify a couple of plays where I thought they might be on to something to help to that point. I mean, we've talked about the Dallas offense in terms of you want to play in the mud. That I think that'd be best for them. They didn't do that in game 2. Let's see game 3. We talked about on defense. There are multiple efforts so that are needed at the point of attack and in rotation. So I think we have the big themes. So now we're getting into nuances. Like, we're not getting into massive, philosophical adjustments. We're talking about nuances. We're talking about the difference between being up 2 and down 2. The difference between up 5 going into the 4th and down 2 going into the 4th, right? So for our audience, let's make sure you keep that in mind and then look for those things to happen or not happen as one of the deciding factors in the game. So I'll just go through 2 plays really quick. So the first one was Derek Lively had a dunk in the middle of the 3rd quarter, and it was the result of 3 rescreens on the ball. The first one being at half court. Not only did it cause some confusion for Boston, but the reason it opened him up as a roll man was to finish a dunk with such emphasis is that the low man at the bottom of the box was Derek White. If Derek Lively gets the ball on the roll against Derek White, he's going to dunk it every time. But it starts with the screen being set at half court and multiple rescreens, multiple times changing the side that the ball screen is coming from. That might, because if Boston is on their stuff, they're not going to be confused. But to have a chance to confuse them, you have to do something like that. So that's the first example. The second example was when in the 4th quarter, about 3:23 in the 4th quarter, Derrick Jones had a layup in the 4th quarter as a result of setting a ball screen at the logo, not so much at the half court, but at the logo, and then rolling. So when that happens, and as especially that Luka was the ball handler, that's an automatic switch for Boston. And Brown was on the ball. Horford was defending Jones. He got onto Luka instantly, immediate switch. So Luka goes to his right. And now PJ Washington comes and sets a second ball screen to Doncic's right, bringing now Jason Tatum over the action. But because PJ Washington was in the paint, now that he's left the paint, it frees up Derrick Jones to roll into space. And because he was deliberate in the time he took to roll, it gave Luka sufficient time to get over both screens and then finding him for the layup. So it was basically like a version of stack or Spain action for all the coaches out there, but with a variation. Clearly, the timing, the setup, it was different, but it essentially the end result is very similar to Spain. Now, Boston's going to see this on tape. They're going to most likely be ready for it. I don't know that Dallas could run this play 3 times and get something good out of it. But again, we're talking about nuances here, right? We're talking about going up 3, down 1, down 2, up 2. Like if we can run this play twice, maybe we get a 3, maybe we get a layup and a foul, maybe we get Boston in rotation, somebody slips, we get a dunk, a steal, and then we get possession again. Maybe a player gets frustrated, there's a tech after the. We're talking about nuances here because for Dallas to win, this has to be an ugly, close game, won on the margins.
Going back to what you're saying, I think also something else that we have to look into is that going into, now the scenery changes. You're going from playing in Boston to playing in Dallas.
That's right.
Maybe there may be a bit of potential for these Dallas players now to the ones who maybe haven't really gotten going. Maybe there's a comfort of home that can really help out. I was looking at Derrick Jones in this game.
For sure.
I liked his activity, right? But the way that he was, I would probably say if you're going to play Derek Lively's role has to change for this team. Like he can't because when I got the chance to coach younger players, a lot of times the players will put in their minds that if they don't score, they don't do anything. Right? I think for like Derek Lively, the biggest thing that he just has to think about is like his role or his sense to the team is you have to be like the paint is yours. Like you got to give him some ownership or something. Change the mentality, and that's the thing with young players. And we forget that Derek Lively's a rookie. Eh?
I know. It's unfair, but at the same time, it's required, right? Like if Dallas is going to win, they need him. Like he can't be complete non-playable and them still have a chance to have multiple games with winning minutes at the center rotation. Like they need his energy, his paint presence, the rim rolling, the shot blocking, some switching as well, some pocket passing.
So important to Luka's game.
That's right. So as you
gotta keep him engaged. Yeah, that's why you got to try to find a way to get him engaged.
That's right. Who knows? Hey, maybe he goes home. Dallas barbecue, right? Maybe he didn't have his pregame meal the same way. I don't know. Again, like Dallas got to be searching for answers. You talked about Porzingis being out, and I think we do need to touch on what does that mean for Boston, right? Like how would you go about filling those minutes, right? He's averaging right now about 22 minutes a game. Al Horford's at 29 right now. So if we go with the starting point that Al is averaging 29 minutes, how would you go about the remaining 19?
You see, that's the part where I think it's a bit like the natural, especially going into a hostile environment. And credit to you, we were talking about it before. You hinted that there may have to be some Jason Tatum minutes at center potentially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You talked about it. He rebounded well enough in the first 2 games, right?
Yeah, so, he was good in game 2. Rebounding wise, he was good in game 2.
So potentially that's something that they have to look out for. But then after the guys that come in, whether it's a Luke Cornett or even like a Xavier Tillman, if they come in, you're coming in, like that's got to be like the role of an assistant coach is so important. You got to prep these guys for that kind of moment.
That's right.
Your role is to hold down the fort. If you give me 2 points,
don't get killed. Just don't get killed, man.
Just be solid. If you give me 2 points, that's a bonus. You get somebody, you get a foul, That's
amazing. Right.
But you have to hold down the fort.
I mean,
Simple.
Luke Cornett might get us a corner three, right? Like maybe we can scavenger a corner three, right? Stretch out the defense. Oh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
might bring his voice, Cornett with the three, right? Maybe we can get that one time, right? Just don't get killed, right? I mean, I think it starts with Al has to play more, right? I think we can
He's
get
probably
him
gonna
to
have to play more.
35, 36, 37. Can we get him to 37? Probably. And then now you have 11 minutes where it's not panic, but it's all hands on deck, right? You say Cornette, Tillman, Tatum at center. I mean, maybe you talk. Maybe you brought this up. Maybe they go zone, but then if they go zone, against who are they going against? Because it's really hard to rebound in the zone, and Dallas has really good offensive rebounders. So you don't want to compound a problem with another problem. So you have to be strategic about this. Maybe it's just coming out of a timeout with a certain lineup at a certain point in the game, and then maybe literally we're bringing O'Shea Brissett for one possession. We're in zone, but it's a matchup zone, so he's really fast and can cover a lot of ground. And then next time out, we're getting him out of it. Like, you have to be creative as the Celtic if you're on the Celtic coaching staff, you have to be creative to if Porzingis is not going to play, you're gonna have to be creative to find solutions.
I think like that's where you kind of evaluate. Like the most important part is, say they do go zone. The most important part in that situation is, how is Dallas going to attack it? If Dallas settles for threes, you're playing at the hands of the Celtics, because that's easy opportunities on the other end. You cannot settle. You can't just, you got to find a way to, even if it's a zone, you still got to find a way to get the ball to the middle. You got to maybe switch sides a couple of times, right? But you cannot come down and shoot a three with 16 seconds on the court. You can't do that. You got to find a way to punish yourself. If a team is if they're going to go zone to try to protect their smaller players, right? Like you said, it's an assault on the rim. We got to get to the basket every single time.
I'm thinking about this out loud here. Dallas had 26 3-point attempts in game one. They had 27 game two. Boston is averaging 40. So that is, regardless of the Boston efficiency, like if you're putting up 13 more attempts, a three per game than your opponent, more than likely you're going to win the game, because you're just going to win the math. So I think one of the problems Dallas has is they're not generating enough threes. So in a zone, the threes is what you're trying to give up defensively, right? The type of scenarios you brought up, if it's a long three, early shot clock, it's a win for the defense. That's true. But then at the same time, we talked about the importance for the Dallas role players, Derek Jones, PJ Washington. We kind of need those guys to get going from three. So I don't know, man. Like it might not be the worst thing in the world for Dallas to take some threes against that zone, but I think the process of how they take those threes will be more informative than whether they took a three or not. That's kind of where my mind is at right now.
I'm gonna say something crazy on the podcast just because I want to be politically correct. If they play extended time in zone, we might see Tim Hardaway Jr.
Somebody. I don't know which podcast I was thinking about. I was listening, but they brought this up as like, well, why isn't Dallas playing him? They might have to dust him off in game three. Oh, if he hasn't played in game two, you think they would play him now? Because he looks like he's been deep sixth. I mean, they're playing Jaden every time they need some kind of punch on offense minutes. They're giving it to Jaden Hardy, and like, Jaden Hardy's has got some potential. Juice off the bounce. I mean, those who have followed prospects have seen his work with G League Ignite in high school. Like, he is who he is. Confidence is always on 1,000. But if the Dallas staff decided to play him over Tim Hardaway, not just in game one, but then in game two, coming off a loss, and we're not changing that minutes distribution, I don't think they're gonna play him. I would. So I understand the concerns about his defensive limitations, but I also agree that if we're going zone and he's playing, he's going to bring us a punch on offense that we need. Now, if Dallas is playing zone against the Boston 3-point attempts, already they're putting up a lot. I know they shot horribly in game two. I think they were 10 of 39. So they shot horribly. I think they were like 6 of 30 at some point. It was bad. But don't give him a chance to get going, because they're going to put him up. And we know the 3-point shooting percentages, they vary. Sometimes you have some wild swings.
Yep.
Don't try to beat the math if the math is against you. You know, like
If the
that
math
might
ain't mathing.
right. If the math ain't, you might not want to do this. You know, so I agree. I think they do need to play zone. In I think it's like a total of 8 possessions. I think it's 2 possessions a quarter, well placed, well picked out, not just in a vacuum. But I think they do need it. I do think they need it. Plus, it might give him the chance to run. You know, like, and maybe then we can get a Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford in transition. Like Luka, no, he tried a couple of hit aheads in the first half, like trying to speed the game up. I mean, there's some turnovers. It didn't necessarily work out, but he should, it might give him some opportunities. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about kind of, closing out here.
Yep.
If we didn't talk about Jason Tatum, because I wanted us to stay away from the quote unquote first stake style discussion about him in this game and try to evaluate the whole of what he gave. He was 6 of 22, like I mentioned. I think in the playoffs right now, per synergy, he is 8 of 44. So that's 18% in isolation situations. So for a guy that's supposed to be a Kobe impersonator, that's not good. That's really, I don't know if you ever had 18% on a test, man. That's not great. It's not great. He did have 12 assists. He did have 9 rebounds. Defensively, he's been guarding the centers. There's been a couple of times where Mavericks would post up Daniel Gafford against him. He scored, but Tatum didn't foul him. He was stout enough that they didn't keep going to him for the entire game. So overall, personally, I'm thinking, okay, he hasn't shot well, kind of stunk, kind of taken some bad shots, especially in game 2. But then there's all the other stuff he's doing. Like, to me, this is like breaking even from a overall performance standpoint, especially Holly's giving you 26. Derek White is out here making game-saving blocks. Jaylen Brown, you talked about, I think he's been the best player in the series, personally speaking. Either him or Jrue, but I would give the edge to Jaylen Brown. So from a Tatum standpoint, like, I would just feel okay. Not good, not great, just okay. What do you think?
I agree. And that's where you kind of think, like, you kind of hope that he's matured enough where it doesn't kind of get into his head, because what's going to happen is, it's hard to go play on the road. So all these, I know they have like a solid rotation, but all these players that were making that were getting all these numbers, Dallas is going to adjust, and they may not have the same numbers. You kind of hope that they're going to stick to team basketball and they're not going to revert back to that.
They have to. Oh, they have to. They're going to win this series. They have to. They have to.
Yeah. No, this was good talk. Josué Sédrjo, you got to go. So, yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk again. Praying, crossing our fingers, we get a game 3. I appreciate you, my friend. This was amazing.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, very much looking forward to game 3. Us basketball fans like to get a series, so I guess we're cheering for the Mavs. But hey, regardless who wins, we'll have a lot to talk about, a lot to analyze. So it doesn't matter. We're going to have a great game. I'm looking forward to it.